Welcome to the Beehive, the podcast where we explore the latest trends, challenges, and strategies in finance and corporate governance. I'm JM, Scrub's ESG Knowledge Lead, and in this episode, I'll be joined by Effie De La Cruz, our partner from Context Nature, to discuss how businesses can and should create sustainable financial decisions. Welcome to the Beehive, Effie.
Thanks for having me, JM.
Now, Effie, I want to know about what do you think is a typical company's approach to sustainability, particularly in terms of building their sustainability teams, how they do their risk management, and other things about sustainability.
So, what I notice organizations typically are siloed. So, what I mean by that is sustainability teams, the finance team, operations, engineering often don't come together at the very beginning, at the planning stage. And that really creates a missed opportunity. When you're thinking about sustainability, this is not something extraneous to what you're doing as a business. You need to really think about how you depend on the environment for natural resources? How do you depend on a lot of the ecosystem services that the environment provides? Or simply put, if you think about your workers, right? How do you treat your workers? Will they be excited to do their job? Or when they come to work, will they be able to do their best job? A lot of companies seem to be report focused as well. And what I mean by that is that they pay attention, of course, to the requirements that are necessary for disclosure. But I often wonder, have they really thought about how to operationalize those requirements to help guide them in embedding sustainability into their practice? For example, I would not even use the term sustainability. I would think about it as increasing efficiency, reducing costs, reducing delays, resiliency. I think a lot of what we've seen that happened during the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, is that supply chains were shook when companies were unprepared to navigate when all of these different countries started to shut down. When we also think about the severe weather that's occurring, if they have not thought through how they plan for those risks, and they were just super focused on what they're going to report next, then they're not really using sustainability strategy as improving and unlocking value in their business.
And Effie, to add on that, actually, what I've seen from my experience with various companies as well is that they focus their data gathering in terms of what is required from reporting,
Hmm.
but they miss the opportunity that the data they gather should be focused on the risk that they want to address. And more often than not, they'll be surprised that when they focus their data gathering efforts into the risk assessment or trying to mitigate those risks, they'll be able to 100% cover all of the data point requirements from reporting.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great observation. It's interesting, right? When you're hyper focused on reporting, that you fail really to see why that reporting requirement was put in place to begin with.
Yeah, so the reporting requirements was established to address the risk that was not being able to identify previously,
Exactly.
not the other way around. So we don't come
Exactly.
up with risk just because of the reporting requirements.
So JM, in your discovery with your clients, how should the approach be?
Yeah, because you've mentioned earlier teams are siloed, right?
Yeah.
Basically, that's coming from the deficiencies from the top. So first of all, the sustainability approach should be considered top down, meaning it should be led by the board, not
Hmm.
being reported to. So they should be the one who's leading the sustainability approach. Now, it should be also company wide, meaning it should not focus on or be the effort should not be focused on specific teams only, but rather approach all of the departments,
Hmm.
operations. So this is a whole company approach. And to further that, this should not just be considered as an internal assessment or as an internal initiative. They should also involve their external stakeholders, their
Hmm.
investors, customers, suppliers, particularly supply chain, and also the communities they serve. Because from that POV, they'll be able to address or identify all of the risks that they should be reviewing or assessing at this point in time.
Follow up on that.
Yes.
Why do you think it's stopping companies from doing it, like you said, coming from the board, coming from the top down, and involving their external stakeholders? Do you think it's cost? Is it lack of education? I'm curious about your thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, Effie, that's a great question. Actually, let's be honest. Most companies and most board and management really think that sustainability would undermine their business competitiveness. Well, there will be a lot of costs when investing into their sustainability programs, but there are also a lot of gains that they could gain from it or get from it. So I would give you an example. So, for example, the engagement or the sustainability program talks about investing on your people. When you invest on your people's safety, their health, their well-being, you'll get increased productivity. And that's just one of examples. I know from your experience, you got a lot of a wide range of exposure in terms of those incentives or gains out of the sustainability program. So can you tell us a bit more about that?
So another gain by uh, integrating sustainability thinking in terms of sourcing, for example, you rely on a lot of raw materials, not understanding where they are sourced from and what the conditions are from where you're sourcing it could be really short sighted. And what could happen is that that disruption cannot be anticipated, and therefore you may not have the material that you use, especially if it's a critical material in your product. The other component too is that if, for example, you are a semiconductor manufacturer and you rely heavily on water as a source, and if you don't know where to build your factory to have a stable water source, that could be again detrimental to the product that you're building. Once again, all of these things should be, I would say, obvious in some regard once you start to break down how these natural resources are a critical component to what you're providing as a product or service. Uh, there's going to be a lot of cost savings embedded there if you are able to take a more proactive risk management approach. Now, on the flip side, when you think about bringing in our heroes in this story, which we want to bring up is the finance and tax people. If a company is strapped for cash, for capital, for these sustainability initiatives, why are we not bringing our tax professionals into the planning process by identifying tax incentives and credits that could be considered at the very beginning? If they know that a creditor incentive requires something, and if they know that from day one planning, then they will have a higher likelihood of maximizing it.
Yeah, definitely agree with you, Effie, because the great miss of the company's approach is not being able to highlight or being able to take advantage of the key strengths of each department. And as you've
Exactly.
mentioned, sustainability is not just about your impact outside in; you also have to check your inside out. And for that end, your finance team and your tax team are ready to help, or definitely have a good insights on what the sustainability approach should be tailored to. Yeah.
Yeah. Another example that we could also take into account is the finance team often will be at the front line on capital expenditures, right? So even if you're replacing your HVAC system or you're replacing certain assets, if you know that you have to consider other impacts, for example, energy usage or even emissions, potential pollutants in those particular assets, if they know that upfront, they're not just looking at cost, they're also looking at potential compliance issues or other risk of fines uh, that they can avoid.
Yeah, and if going through further through that, if speaking about capital expenditures and acquisitions, if you really think about it, when you try to acquire something, you're not just focusing on
Hmm.
costs. That would be like a straightforward, let's select the most
Yeah,
cost efficient right now. But moving forward, speaking of the long term or you're thinking long term, you have to think about whether you can still use that asset in the coming years because there
exactly.
will be a lot of regulations, changes in customer demands or customer dynamics,
Hmm.
customer wants that might render your asset or your investment obsolete because of those change in requirements or compliance matters. Yeah, and Effie, now putting into
Hmm.
like a bit of a highlight on the tax practitioners or our
Yes.
professionals, what do you think could the gain that we could get from them by involving them into injecting their professional experiences or expertise with our sustainability programs?
Yeah, when I think about our tax and finance team, I always think about how do we make the business case, right? Which includes heavily on what can we spend, what is our budget. And if we're involving them early on, they should be able to identify once again all these tax credits and incentives that could be a source of money, right? That they're leaving on the table if they don't involve them.
Yeah, and speaking of tax credits, I know you
Yes.
have
Yes.
another conversation with a tax professional. So let's ensure that we'll be able to watch out. I'll definitely watch out on that conversation as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
No, thank you. I'm looking forward to that.
yeah,
So, Jane, we talked a lot about the short term opportunities and risks. I'm curious in your conversations with clients, uh, thinking more long term, what types of innovation and new business models have you encouraged your clients to take into consideration?
yeah. So thanks, Effie. We've talked about a lot of risk and a lot of issues in terms of managing resources,
Mhm.
and with those risks or hindrances to operations, the creativity, the that risk and problems
Mhm.
pushes people to be more creative. Therefore, they think they're able to find new ways to improve their business, find new ways to generate revenue. Let's talk about, for example, circular economy. Previously, drink manufacturing facilities are just focused on manufacturing their drinks,
Mhm.
but now they're focused or they are giving importance to how they manage the outputs or the bottles or
Mhm.
any of their I would say product remains or remnants after
Mhm.
the customers have enjoyed their main products.
Mhm.
So a lot of those manufacturers now shift also into the reuse or the recycling business opportunities. Landfills back then, as another example, are
Mhm.
just viewed as dumps, but
Mhm.
now they're also viewed as energy capturing or a great
Exactly.
source of energy. So from that creativity, there's a lot or a ton of opportunities. And these opportunities are not just concentrated to those that are sustainability inclined, I would say, but even for those other businesses. For example, when you're on a tech company,
Mhm.
you can develop tech that would help those businesses navigate sustainability by providing them technology that would improve their efficiency.
Mhm.
Therefore, you're already being a contributor to sustainability. So there's a lot of thinking that is, when you look at it, it could just be a traditional thinking, which really is what sustainability is all about. It's pre-existing despite the lack
Mhm.
of or absence of regulation back then. And another thing is when you talk about new opportunities, you're
Mhm.
not just looking into new products and services. You also have to think of new ways for cost savings,
Mhm.
things like that. And also think of new ways to engage your customers.
Mhm.
Identify what they need, what their evolving wants are, because people taste change from time to time. So if you remain stagnant, you'll not be able to meet your changing market demands. And being sustainable means you're able to touch your stakeholders.
Mhm.
One key term or repetitive factor in when we talk about sustainability is stakeholder engagement. So you don't just engage your stakeholders with the aim of gathering data for your reporting. You engage with them to understand what their focus are, what their needs, what their wants, and therefore as part of your process, you're able to identify, okay, this will be the next thing that my customer wants. So maybe I want to venture on that as well.
Mhm.
So those kind of conversations should also be captured when you talk about stakeholder engagement. And of course, if you want to be ready with all those
Yes.
conversations and opportunities, you have to ensure that your business is resilient. Being resilient means you're not just prepared financially. Of course, financial resiliency is very important, but financial resiliency just follows the other resiliency topics or considerations that you have to consider.
Mhm.
One of which would be climate resiliency. Without putting into too much theoretical concepts out there, I'll give you an example. Climate resiliency just basically means, is your business prone to service or operational disruptions,
Mhm.
mainly caused by like a typhoon, or
Mhm.
extreme flooding, rising sea
Exactly.
levels, those kinds of natural occurrence that they happen all the time. You cannot escape from it. So those are realities that you
Mhm.
should be aware of and you should consider when preparing your business plans, business strategy. So deciding where
Mhm.
to place your manufacturing plant, where to locate your business is already a sustainable decision or a sustainability
Exactly.
assessment. So sustainability decision making is not far from how we think. It's just that pushing forward in terms of the additional considerations that you have to revisit.
Mhm.
While we talk about climate resiliency, when you place your business there as the talent within that community
Hmm.
suitable as well? Or is your business suitable for the community as well? Maybe it's
Exactly.
against their norms, it's against how they operate their
Hmm.
lives. So you have to consider that as well. So
Hmm.
sustainability merely talks about expanding the horizon of what you look at.
Yeah, what I was reminded when you were mentioning about climate resiliency is the other factor on insurability. So this could be a cost or also an opportunity. A lot of insurance companies, of course, now see if you are going to be increased probability for flooding, for fire, and if you're not embedding sustainability thinking in your planning, that could hit your bottom line.
Yeah, and with the finance team's help, you'll be
Yes.
able to get notified that you're being assessed for insurance, or your insurance payments are being reassessed. Yeah. Now, Effie, we've covered a lot of
Hmm.
grounds or topics in this episode, and of course, I want to hear your summative thoughts on the important things that you want us to remember.
Jim, maybe we can start by the term sustainability. Often I think that gets in the way of extracting the true value sustainable decision making really means. Maybe let's just replace that by thinking about incorporating in the long term the considerations around how the environment, access to raw materials, access to water, air, soil, land, into how you run your business and how you make your products. By taking that into consideration early into the planning process, that will really help create more financial stability for the company.
Yeah, definitely, Effie. So, really, long-term thinking is very important, and that's the very key for like more propelled growth for all of the businesses. Well, that really was a mind-opening discussion, Effie. I really learned a lot. So, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate all the values and insights that you've shared.
Thanks so much, JM. It's my pleasure.
And with that, we'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Beehive.